Okay, so we've sort of established the groundwork that we really need vulnerability disclosure, and that there are these people called security researchers. So what do you need to do? Well, you know, want to explain some of the basic precursors to this, and what you need to do as a company. So first of all, you need to get your own house in order. That's the very basic thing. You need to establish how you're going to handle the vulnerabilities internally. And there is an ISO specification for this. This is mentioned at the end of this presentation, but ISO 30111 defines how you establish those vulnerability handling processes internally. For a very small company, you need to make sure that the key stakeholders are engaged, and the quick start guides that Emily mentioned at the start outline some of those individuals and the role holders that need to be aware of vulnerability disclosure. And really, we're talking about people like product managers. When we look at the IoT Security Foundation's work in this area, we also look at board level sign off for the processes and things like that. This is something that board members do need to be aware of, because certainly from a PR perspective, they will be needed to go out there and talk about this at some point. And they need to be kept aware, particularly where things develop into serious security vulnerabilities that are disclosed. They also have a responsibility to be ensuring that this is in place in their own companies. This is part and parcel of overall cybersecurity, as I said. There's also a lot of guidance available on this. So IoTSF have their own guidance, which tells you how to create those vulnerability disclosure policies, and really lays it out for you and gives you a ready-made document for you to go to. Internally, you also need to establish a process for searching for and eliminating vulnerabilities in your products as well, and for monitoring in the market, as I mentioned before. Essentially, what you're looking for is a product security function, and this is scalable depending on what kind of company you are. But I did see recently that NIST are promoting the idea of a chief product security officer, which is really an interesting development. I'm not completely sure about that myself, but it shows the sort of level of importance that is applied to products these days. But you do need to make sure that you're ready and that you have processes in place, that suit your size of company, that are ready and able to respond quickly. So what I like to do is ensure that companies have single points of contact with other partners. So if you do have suppliers of things further back in the supply chain, make sure you know who those people are, who the right security contacts are in those organizations. Don't wait until you have an incident before you need to go and search out who those people are, and actually make contact with them regularly. Work within forums as well. Emily mentioned at the start that I chair the fraud and security group at GSMA. Primarily, the benefit for most of the companies involved in that is the intelligence sharing aspect, that human to human contact, that they know that there's somebody in the same position as them, in the same industry, that they can pick the phone up to. And you develop that relationship of trust amongst the participants, and eventually it comes good. And that intelligence sharing, that information sharing, really does reap rewards in the long term. But you can also sign up to alerts from certs or alerts from particular vendors for security vulnerabilities and so on. That will also help in your posture. and you can also choose to share information to others too. So really that's the first thing you need to do, is that sort of homework exercise. Put in place those processes. Do read the ISO 30111 specification and understand what you need to do before you start to put up a public website. Okay, so at this point now we're going to look at a means of contact. So in the very simplest sense, that is an email address. And what is expected by most security researchers is security at. Now, I've been through a lot of this in the past. You know, you get companies that go, well, actually, security at gets you to the security gatehouse at the front of our building, and corporate security and things like that. Or the email address is taken and they can't get that off the department. So it's acceptable to have other addresses. Even big companies like Apple don't use security at, but as long as that is publicly known, that's the important thing. If you don't have a publicly known address, security researchers will often go after things like postmaster at, knowing that these addresses exist, like admin at. The problem with those sorts of addresses is they can get lost in the noise. There can be a lot of spam sent to those addresses, and they're often not monitored. I've dealt with issues in the past, and these are partly due to bad faith disclosures, where, for example, a security researcher deliberately went to a service center in the Czech Republic because they wanted to delay the process. And they knew that we would never really get that response come back to us and be able to deal with it in a timely manner. And so what this does is, by having this one address, you channel the researcher. So you're removing excuses as well. So they can't say, oh, well, I reported it to the local service center, so therefore you must do X. When you've got a public page and you go, this is where you report security vulnerabilities to, you're channeling the security researcher in the right direction, and you're removing the excuses of the bad faith researchers, because you're doing what you had to do, you're doing the right thing. You know, this is all to your benefit. In the IOTSF recommendation, we recommend a secure web form to contact, and some companies publish PGP keys. Now, it's really, you know, there's no prescription to that. It's really just good practice. I mean, what you're trying to do there is avoid the situation where somebody's essentially targeting your company to capture the vulnerabilities as they're reported to you. Some security researchers and even some companies will be uncomfortable using PGP. For example, that might be seen as a route to infiltrate malware into that company. And it's really down to your own company decisions and your own risk assessments. As I say, some security researchers live and die by it, others really don't, and they don't want to use it. And again, having those flexible options for the security researcher is really, really important. If they want to send you a plain text email, let them send you a plain text email. The ultimate goal is for you to receive that report. So that's, you know, relatively easy to set up. If you're a small company, you can do that in 20 minutes. If you want to put a /security page up, that is best practice as well. So the public-facing website has that /security page, and again, it doesn't have to be that. But what you would do on that web page is put up the VDP, the Vulnerability Disclosure Policy, and that's where you're explaining exactly what you're going to do. And how you're going to handle the researcher. Now, there are a lot of examples of this. You can have a look at other companies, what they've done. I find it's interesting that some of them are quite passive-aggressive wording. I prefer short and friendly wording. And what you're doing is explaining what your policy is in a brief sense, how you're going to deal with it. So in this case, to privately report a suspected issue to us, please send an email to X, giving as much detail. We'll respond to you as soon as possible. If the suspected issue is confirmed, we'll then come back to you with an estimate of how long the issue will take to fix. Once the fix is available, we'll notify and recognize you on your efforts on this page. That's one way of doing it. I've seen other ones that specifically say what type of research they don't exclude. I'm going to come to that in a second. But you can see here, this is the acknowledgements. Now, this is one of the simplest ways of gaining favor with the security researcher, is just to acknowledge their efforts. It costs you nothing. Actually, most security researchers aren't coming to you looking for money. They're coming to you in a lot of cases because they think it's the right thing to do. And so simply acknowledging their efforts, the common protocol is to put their name and their Twitter handle. And for a lot of security researchers, that's very good for them because then they can put that on their CV. Other ways of doing it is they might register those vulnerabilities as CVEs within the NIST national database. This presentation isn't about that, but there are other ways that security researchers can get recognition. And for you as a company to support that, again, it's not costing you any money, it's just goodwill. And that individual may come back to you again and help you again in the future. So this is an example here. I can't remember which company this is from, but the wording is kind of interesting. And so you see some companies saying, you know, we do not permit, or this is unacceptable security research. Well, if you think about it from a hacker's point of view and the hacker mindset, nothing's off limits. So, you know, at what point can you tell me, no, I can't do that? It's ridiculous from the hacker mindset. It's not ridiculous from the lawyer's mindset in that company who are protecting that company. But you need to find that middle ground. You need to find the language that both, I would say, pacifies the lawyers rather than satisfies the lawyers, but then also doesn't set off alarm bells for the hacker or puts their hackles up and upsets the hacker in some way. Now, obviously, the company's trying to protect itself with things like, you know, not permitting the attempted destruction, so you're not doing denial of service against the website or taking it down or removing personal data, because the company has the responsibility, the legal responsibility in Europe under GDPR to protect the data from a security and a confidentiality standpoint. The same with interception as well. That is illegal in most countries, and so it shouldn't be for the company to promote that, as it were. So, you know, the fact is that companies need to understand that they're bridging. This is the bridging point between the researcher and them. And the aim is for the researcher to feel comfortable enough to disclose everything and for you to be able to work with them. Another way of doing that is a new concept, which is called security.text. There's a informational RFC at IETF, which is the Internet Standards Body. And this is an example here from the BBC. Very, very simplistic, but some security researchers prefer to use this method because it's very quick for them to type this in on a Linux box to be able to check what those contact methods are. And it's also consistent. It means they don't have to go to a web page and find exactly where that page is if it's not /security, and they can be completely buried in all over the place. So this is an attempt to standardize that and to find a machine readable and machine accessible method of getting to those same details. So nowadays it would be best practice probably to do both, and you know, it is a completely developing subject domain, and this is really the cutting edge.